College Kottayam Internal Quality Assurance Cell and Research Cell proudly presents International Webinar Series Vykhari 2021, a series of lectures hosted by various departments of the college, inviting illustrious teachers. We aim to equip each student with the armor of knowledge to fight the challenges of the borderless globe. A person, when on knees, is a powerful warrior. Prayer is the deepest conversation the human soul makes. Before we begin with our session, it would be great as we spare a moment in silence for prayer, please. Thank you. It is our honor to welcome each one gathered here. To fulfill this warm responsibility, I heartily welcome our respected HOD, Dr. Ria Susan Skaria. She is undoubtedly a source of comfort and strength for her students and colleagues, a friend to many and follower of morals. Ma'am, please extend the welcome note.
Thank you, Kesia. Hello, good morning, everyone. Respected speaker of the day, Dr. Anjana Varan, invited guests, colleagues, and my dear students. I am much delighted to welcome all of you to the annual lecture series of BCM College, Vykhari 2K21. The Postgraduate Department of English is happy to conduct an international webinar on the topic, The Challenges of Diaspora Identities. Diaspora has become an interesting topic since the beginning of post-colonial studies. Diaspora is the voluntary or forcible movement of people from their homelands into new regions. Today, we have with us Dr. Anjana Varan, who has been settled in Thailand for more than a decade, and she is an active researcher in the field of diasporic writings. I'm sure that you'll be highly benefited on listening to the first-hand experiences of Dr. Varan. She teaches at the Humanities and Language Division, Intercultural Studies and Language of Mahidol University International College, Salaya, Thailand. She is the program coordinator for Intercultural Studies and Language programs. She has several international journal publications and conference presentations to her credit. Her areas of expertise are diaspora studies, diaspora literature, women and gender studies, South Asian, Southeast Asian studies, and public speaking. She is an alumnus of Madras Christian College, where I happen to be her junior. She has taken her PhD from the University of Madras. With much pleasure and with much pride, let me welcome Dr. Anjana Varan to this international webinar. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ria, for your warm welcome. Ria and I share very fond memories of our time back at Madras Christian College, our university days. Thank you to Department of English, BCM College, for inviting me to this webinar. Thank you, Ansi DeJoy, for coordinating. Everyone who's involved in this, thank you to all of you to be here. You could have been somewhere else, but you chose to be here. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. All right. So today, I think I'll talk about understanding the challenges of diaspora identities. Let me start sharing the screen. I hope this works, and then we can start right away. All right. Okay. There you go. Alrighty, so, challenges of diaspora identities. Now, I have to tell you that this is not really literature-based because my kind of research is qualitative fieldwork research. and in Diaspora Studies, and I work with the Sikh diaspora in Thailand right now. So I thought of putting together some of my first-hand experience working with this diaspora community and the issues with identity that many of them go through. One thing that was evident was that it's not just in particular to the Sikh diaspora. Almost all diaspora communities around the world, especially with the Indian diaspora community around the world, many of these issues are universal. So what you find in this community can be applied. It is actually pretty much the same with other diaspora communities elsewhere. Yeah, so that's what we'll be looking at. Now, I know that some of you are familiar with the term diaspora. Well, some people call it diaspora. I call it diaspora. There you go. What we'll do is, for those of you who are not so familiar with this term, we'll start from the origin to the issues of identity, and then later on we talk about the problems with the identity, and then what are the solutions that many of the diaspora individuals are looking at. Okay, all right. So starting with the term diaspora. Now, the term diaspora actually originated from the Greek word diasporin, dia meaning axis, and sporin means scatter. Now, when we look at it, it's always it is associated with colonization and migration, the term diaspora. Now, when we look at the historical background of diaspora, it goes way back to like the 6th and 7th century BC, when the Jewish dispersion happened. I'm sure that you know that this is like mentioned in the Bible. So when that scatter happened, that dispersion happened from Jerusalem into the different parts of the world, that dispersion. So that is where it actually originated. So the first diaspora, to be speaking, is the Jewish diaspora. And then later on, of course, the Armenian diaspora, and then, the migration happened from Eastern Europe to Western Europe, and then migration to the United States of America during the First and the Second World Wars. So that's kind of like the historical background of diaspora, how, like in ancient times, how these diaspora communities kind of moved about. Yeah. All right. Now we are going to look at the characteristics of a diaspora as a diaspora community. Now here the focus is, and what we are talking about is the original meaning, the original characteristics that were attributed to diaspora. In the case of the first generation immigrants, the first generation diaspora communities, as in the people who just originally dispersed from their country of origin to a different country, so that displacement happened. People left for whatever reason. People fled from their place, or because of political unrest, or because of religious persecution, whatever reason. People moved from their country of origin into a foreign region. And another important characteristic is that all these communities, the diaspora communities, these individuals, they all have like a collective memory of myth of their homeland. There is always this wanting to go back to their country of origin, because remember, I told you that it was, most of them, it was like forced migration, right? So people always wanted to go back. And then they kind of dream about going back and settling back in their country of origin and things like that. So in a way, they idealize their ancestral homeland. So these are some of the characteristics of the diaspora in the original sense when we look at the ancient diaspora. Yeah. And another thing is that the diaspora individuals during those times always felt that they never belonged to the host country, as in the country that they migrated to. They always kind of like stuck out like a sore thumb, it's just, they always felt different. They were in their own worlds and everything. There was no integration happening there. And they felt, and of course, they were not accepted by their host country. Yeah. Now, because most of you have literature background, I thought of, just summarizing the diaspora consciousness of the first generation immigrants through the works of Mina Alexander, one of the famous diasporic authors. And in her memoir Fault Line, she says, "My own soul seemed to me then a cabbage-like thing, closed tight in a plastic cover. My two worlds, present and past, were apart, and I was the fault line, the crack that marked the dislocation." So she actually just summarized like beautifully, painfully, the diaspora consciousness of the first generation immigrants, the first generation diaspora individuals. How there is that when we look at her words, it's like, you can see that the fault line, the crack, the displacement, the dislocation. So, how like diaspora individuals who are trying to make sense of their belonging. They're like in between like worlds. They feel like they're hanging in limbo, like not here, not there, There's always the displacement. There's always that movement. Their psyches are like kind of like split apart. They can't place themselves anywhere. It's basically like kind of like uprooting a tree from its original place and trying to sort of like plant it and trying to make it reroot, in a different place. So of course, that's going to be difficult, right? It's not going to happen easy. It takes time. It's the same with individuals, and especially with the first generation immigrants. This is what happened. They uprooted themselves from their country of origin, and then they placed themselves in a different country. And then obviously it wasn't easy. Different stages of adjustments, all of those, they felt like they are in the midst of nowhere, does not make sense, all those things, yeah. But I'm not going into all of those issues with the first generation immigrants, diaspora communities identity, because our focus right now, my research is on the current generation. When I say current generation, it is like, let's look at the diaspora consciousness of the millennials, of the Gen X and Gen Z, of course. So that's what we'll be looking at. But I thought by just putting this out there, you kind of get an idea, like you can compare how, it actually differs. It varies from, the first generation to the current generation. When we talk about current generation, mostly like who I'm working with is the fourth generation of Thai Sikhs. Their great grandparents felt about the diaspora situation is completely different from how, the present generation feel about it. So that's what we'll be looking at. But anyway, I thought this will be, good for our general understanding about diaspora consciousness. Now, moving like in a more recent definition of diaspora, in the words of Vykhari, it's an imagined connection between a post-migration population, including refugee population. Now we know that, collectively, the world that we are in, we went through, we are still going through refugee crisis, a lot of displacement of people happening around the world, all of these things. So the refugee population moving, they are diaspora as well. And then, these people and place of origin with people of similar origins now living elsewhere in the world. That's a more recent definition of diaspora that we can give. To put it in simple words, basically, diaspora is like a large group of people with a similar heritage or homeland who have moved out to different places in the world. That's what it is. To have like a better understanding of diaspora, I thought I'll just put side by side both the classical definition of or characteristics of diaspora and the more modern characteristics of it. So when we look at the classical characteristics, meaning of diaspora, it is evident that diaspora in the ancient times was almost always forced. Remember, I was talking about, you know, like the forced displacement, the dispersion happened because of political unrest, religious persecution, all those things. Like people had to flee from their home country to elsewhere. And they were called like the victim diaspora, like Jewish diaspora is a victim diaspora. So something like that. So the ancient, you know, the meaning, the older like meaning of diaspora is like characteristic of it is that it was almost always a forced migration. And then everybody had this idea of like eventual return to their homeland. I mean, they never thought of the host country that they migrated to as their real home. So they always had this notion of going back home and making a living, something, you know, they kind of like dream about this situation, going back and reestablishing themselves in their own home country. And obviously the host integration is not expected, as in there is no assimilation. I'm not sure whether you are familiar with, maybe some of you are familiar with the term assimilation, the whole idea of like the melting pot situation, being integrated in the host society. That was not really expected. They couldn't do that, you know, during those times. Now, when we look at the modern meaning of diaspora, the characteristics, the migration can be voluntary. Now we know that people just migrate to different parts of the world for whatever reasons. People go for jobs to make a better living. People just go to a different part of the world to be with family, to, you know, rejoin with their family members, any of these. So it's not really forced or anything. It's not the victim diaspora anymore, right? So it's more voluntary. People just migrate. It's more of a transnational character, like beyond boundaries, beyond borders and everything. I mean, I'm sure that you do post-colonial literature and everything, so I'm sure you're familiar with these terms, you know, of this transnationalism, biculturalism, and cultural hybridity, which of course we'll be dealing with a little bit later on in this presentation, okay? So the whole idea is that it's more, what can I say? It's more inclusive, yeah, it's more open, it's like beyond borders, kind of. Like it's not just a single culture. And then cultural hybridity. Shout out to Homi Bhabha, you know, because he was talking about cultural like hybridity and what was that? Culture being in a flux and everything, right? If I remember correctly. Yeah, so that's what it is. That's the modern meaning characteristic of diaspora. So just to give you a little bit of idea about diaspora studies, it originated in the late 1970s. It is multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary in nature, basically an offshoot of post-colonial studies, and because deals with political epistemic domination, you know, race, gender, language, subalternity, identity, of course, yeah. So these are the things that that are dealt with in post-colonial studies as well. So the same thing happens, but it's a different branch, and you know, yeah, diaspora studies have their own issues as well. So another thing, those of you who are interested in the literature part of diaspora studies, there is this branch called diaspora literature, or in some parts of the world, it's called diasporic literature. Basically, this is like like books written by diaspora individuals. Yeah, like Bhade Mukherjee, Jumbalari, Chitra Banerjee, Divakarani, Rohinton Mistry, all of them, I'm sure that you have heard and read their works, yeah? So they're all, it's all part of diaspora literature. What do they deal with? Basically, nostalgia, displacement, alienation, the whole, rootlessness, all of those, and obviously identity. So you see that identity is one of the core issues of diaspora studies, really. And the whole focus on identity, in fact, actually started from the 1990s onwards. That's when, researchers have started paying more attention to the whole issue of identity and the different aspects of it. So I thought I'll just give an introduction to these two areas just to give you a better understanding of what we are doing right here. Now, here comes the major, like the theoretical part of it. Because we are looking at identity and what exactly is your identity. Now, when we think about it, the whole question of identity is very complex, isn't it? Like, I don't know about you, but if somebody asks me a question like, who are you? It's very difficult to answer. If you can answer very clearly, well and good job. But for many people, that's a very complex question. The reason is because we are not just one thing, There are like different layers of identity in all of us in a way. Now, this is very debatable, guys. So, yeah, some people are into this whole fixed identity kind of thing. They have their own reasons, but when we look at it, the world that we are living in, it's very difficult for us to have just like a fixed identity. It's just like we have like different roles in society. It's like roles in place and everything. We all go through all of these. There are like different layers. We have multiple identities. Thinking about that, identity as an, remember, it's like a post-colonial concept, isn't it? Like identity being like multiple identity in a flux, like it's fluid, yeah? Fluid identity. And I'm very much in for that, like that fluidity in identity. And for many of us who are not living in their country of origin and everything, if people ask our identity, we cannot just give like one fixed answer because there are different identities incorporated in just one person, yeah? So there it is. And Stuart Hall actually talks about identity as a matter of becoming as well as of being. It's like becoming. You see that word like becoming? So there's like there's an evolution, isn't it? Like something like evolving into. Identity is like that. It's not stagnant. It's volatile. It's like ever-flowing kind of becoming. You are like, probably, okay, you identify with something like right now you're somebody, and then later on you evolve into someone else. So you have like multiple identities, yeah? So, yeah. So that's what it is. And when we think about the definition to the word identity psychologically, so psychology actually defines this as a cognitive construct of the self. And that obviously answers the question, who am I? And I think that's one of the most complex questions you can ask anyone, really. Who are you? Just ask, who are you? Yeah. And this is very complex with diaspora individuals. Now, this is from my own experience, talking to people from different diaspora around the world. Obviously my research is with Sikh diaspora, but then of course, I'm in contact with like different diaspora communities, individuals from different diaspora communities around the world. So it's like, this is a very complex question. who are you? Who am I? Yeah, so identity is complex. Now, I just included a theory from sociology, the social identity theory here, because we will be taking, we'll be looking at it in the case of the Sikh diaspora that we'll be talking about a little bit later. Yeah, so basically social identity theory identifies individuals as belonging to like different groups. Yeah, this is about the social identity of individuals. Okay, when we think about identity here, we are looking at the social, religious and cultural identity of individuals, of diaspora individuals, all right? So this is just to have a better understanding of the social identity. This is a social identity theory of categorizing individuals into different groups, belonging to a group, yeah? And basically this group is like, it identifies a person's what's that, their nationality, their group membership, religion, political, all the, you know, kind of demographic kind of stuff. So this is what social identity theory is, and we will be going back to this a little bit later. All right, so this is what identity is. Now, my focus in my research is the current you know, generation, well, I put Gen X, Gen Z, and their diaspora identity. So I work with the Sikh diaspora in Thailand. So these are, when we talk about like Sikh diaspora, the ancestors of the current generation, they came to Thailand during a partition. It all started from, you know, during the like partition of India. And that's when people like, you know, fled to different, from Punjab and, you know, the like what's that, the border with Pakistan, yeah, like people from there, they fled to different parts of the world, and many came to Thailand, and many of them came here as merchants, yeah, so for trade and everything. So many of them are like business people around here. So we'll be looking at the issues with diaspora in the case of the Sikhs, but then many of these things, you will realize that these are all universal issues when we talk about diaspora individuals in general, yeah? It applies to especially Indian diaspora individuals around the world. This is pretty much the same. Now, the problem here with the diaspora community is that in a host society, there will almost always be the problem with stereotyping and, you know, prejudice and everything regarding the social identity, because again, going back to like, you know, putting people in groups and everything. So there's this like kind of like putting like, you know, the diaspora individuals like in a box. They're like, you know, sort of like compartmentalized, and then really not much like integrated into the host society, the mainstream society, yeah? So that kind of thing. So there is always that stereotyping and prejudice that's happening with the diaspora individuals. Now, let me tell you a little bit of background about my research and how like I started working with the Sikh diaspora in Thailand. Now I teach at a university, at an international university. So you know, our student population is pretty diverse, and we have students from different parts of the world. Majority of them are native Thais, but of course people from different, you know, there are students from different parts of the world, and there are a lot of Thai Indians, Thai Sikhs, yeah. So, and I have a lot of Thai Sikh students. So I noticed that they all just hang out together. There's not much of an interaction happening between them and the native Thais, yeah. Like
the hanging out part and everything is with, like you can see, like, just in groups. If they're all like Thai Sikh students like hanging out. So I was kind of like intrigued, I just want to know why this is happening, because when we look at it, these students, the Thai Sikhs, the Sikh students, they are Thai. They're born here in Thailand. They speak Thai. They have Thai passports. However, there's not much of an open interaction between them and native Thai. So that's how it all started, And I kind of identified the whole clustering nature of these diaspora students. And then, I started doing fieldwork research and everything. And I found out that not just with students, but with, the community in general, I found that most of them, almost all of them, go through like different stages of identity crisis. Yeah, so identity is a core issue with diaspora individuals. And when we talk about the crisis with identity, many researchers around the world in different parts of, let's say, in North America and in the UK and everything, when researchers did their study with the Indian diaspora individuals, they found similar results. And Joshi actually worked with the Indian American community, diaspora community, and she found out that, these diaspora individuals, now she worked with the second generation immigrants, and she found that they felt like perpetual foreigners in the US. And of course, when you think about it, second generation as in they're like born there and they are Americans in every way, but still, they're not really considered Americans. And the diaspora, the psyche of the diaspora individuals never really felt at home, it seems. So that's what she found out. And working with the Sikhs in Canada, Nayar actually found out that, the Sikhs always had this problem with this split identity, this hyphenated identity. When you say like Indo-Canadian or Sikh Canadian and everything, they want to be called Canadian, but then that never happens really. There's always that hyphenated identity, and that was a problem for them, and many of them found that a problem. But then of course they can't do anything about it. They have to accept it. Yeah, so that's how it is. So it's a problem. There is a crisis. They're not happy with that. And Taddy in 2011 talks about, Sikhs in America, how they felt about this whole, need for like constructing and deconstructing and reconstructing their identities. Yeah, because again, like I talked to you before, that identity being in a flux, that volatile nature of that identity, there is that like breaking down and then rebuilding it kind of thing. So for diaspora individuals, that's a real struggle. There is like that reconstructing and deconstructing, and then that kind of situation. And this happens with several American Sikhs. And research actually shows that, especially like in comparison to the white American population, the white Americans hold like really like enormous economic and political power there. So compared to that, it's a real struggle for the Indian diaspora individuals to just kind of like keep up with them, to just hold their own identity and establish themselves. I mean, things are changing, obviously, don't get me wrong, things are changing. People are coming into mainstream society. But in general, this is like what you see on the surface, right? So when you do like real in-depth interviews with people, So this is what they kind of like pour out their issues with identity, and this is what we find, yeah, in fieldwork research. So that being said, I'm reminded of the other day, I was talking to a friend of mine who is who's an Indian Canadian, yeah. So he he lives in Germany, and so so he was telling me that we were talking about like the issues with identity and everything. So he was like, it's very difficult, like, you know, in Germany, when he says he's Canadian, then people will be looking at him and say, oh, but you're brown, you know. Oh, but are you from India? Like, the appearance part of it. So you cannot really say, I mean, somebody who is born in Canada, somebody who is like very much, you know, like Canadian in every other way, other than obviously the physical appearance part of it. In the sense, people, this is the same pretty much everywhere, you know. So somebody says like a diaspora individual, especially South Asian, you know, if they say they're like American Canadian, oh, the first thing they say is, oh, but you're not white. I mean, people lack exposure, all of those, yeah, but still, this is what happens, guys. So there's always that problem with like being accepted as part of the mainstream society. So there is always this struggle happening, yeah, with the social, religious, cultural identity. Why is it religious? As especially in the case of Sikhs, yeah, their religious identity is very, very prominent. So that is why I put the religious, you know, put emphasis on the religious one. Let us look at the social identity part of it. You know, going back to, remember I told you that we'll be looking at social identity theory a little bit later. So this is here, it is, so, you know, how people are grouped into different groups. So according to social identity theory, like, you know, like human beings can be grouped into two different groups, the in-groups and the out-groups. So in-groups is like those like ourselves, us, yeah? Somebody who is from similar backgrounds, similar cultural identities, something, you know, like ethnicity, all of those things. So that is the in-group. And those who are not like us are the out-group, yeah? So like that, those that differ from ourselves. Now, why I said that is because this is the problem, like, you know, the issue with the Sikhs in Thailand. So the Sikhs actually are the in-group, and they consider the native Thais as the out-group. The same, like vice versa, the same thing with the native Thais. They are the in-group, and the Thai Sikhs, even though they're Thai in every way, they are still the out-group. So there is that issue with the identity, you see, social identity issues, because they're never considered completely Thai, even though they want to. When you talk to them, they say, well, I want to be called Thai, but that never really happens, you know. They almost always feel like an outsider in their own country of birth. So that's a very difficult situation. Now, obviously the difference is, you know, because of your ethnicity, the physical appearance, yeah, really differentiates the Thai Sikhs from the native Thais, obviously. And another thing I want to tell you is that with the Sikhs, yeah, it's very evident. More than any other diaspora community, for Sikhs, their religious identity is very, very evident, and the appearance part of it, because not so much for the women, obviously, but for men, you know, they don't cut their hair, they wear their turban or their top knot, they wear like other religious markers, yeah. So it's very obvious, their religious identity. Now, so physical appearance part is completely different. They want to be called Thai, but then because the native Thais do not perceive them as Thai, they settle for the hybrid hyphenated identity, which is Thai Sikh. And another important characteristic of the Sikh community is that they are endogamous. They mostly kind of like intermarry, like within the community. They do not, they do not, they marry within the community. They rarely intermarry with the native Thais, even though things are slowly changing up a little bit now with the, currently I see that, it's like, the current generation, it's a little bit more, they're a little bit more open to all of those things, but still, there's always that pressure from the family and the traditions and all of those that they have to keep up with, which actually is another problem that many of the diaspora individuals of the current generation face, because their parents are traditional minded people. So they are used to, they're living in a community which is more liberal in outlook, but then when they go back home, they have to be in this completely traditional setting. Yeah, so that again is a struggle. Now, the religious identity and then the social identity part, the problem of the in-group, the out-group situation, this is very much there. And many of them, in fact, almost all these diaspora individuals that I talked to, they said that they have gone through, they have experienced some sort of discrimination, racial discrimination at some point of their lives. Yeah, so it's not too severe for some people, but for maybe very minor, but still, some sort of calling people called cake, not cake, but cake. Yeah, actually the real meaning of the term is guest, but then when you do that as a name calling, it's like a derogatory name calling, really. Yeah, so call Indians cake and everything. So many of them actually express that, they've gone through that. They were actually made fun of for their skin color, for their turban, their appearance, all of those things. Yeah. And another thing is, if there is an argument happening between a native Thai and a Thai Sikh, definitely another native Thai would side with, somebody from his group and not with the Thai Sikh. So many of them said that they had experiences like that as well. So in one way or the other, there is some sort of discrimination that people from the diaspora community feel in their own country of birth. Another important thing is, they can be mistaken for Muslims, and many of them. This is due to lack of exposure. I'm not talking about the educated population in Thailand, but the real ordinary Thais who do not have much of an exposure and who actually do not know anything about Sikhism. Even though Sikhism is an official religion in Thailand, many of them don't know anything about it. So yeah, they can be, because they have turban, and of course, Bin Laden had turban. That's what they're thinking, post 9/11, yeah, incident. Now we know that this is not a situation exclusive to Thailand. It's like that everywhere, right? Remember how this racism ran rampant through different parts of the world, in the US and Canada and everywhere else. Sikhs were persecuted because they had to face a lot of racial discrimination because they were because of Islamophobia, right? And people were mistaken for that. So this happened. So this is a universal issue again with the diaspora communities. Yeah. So these are some of the issues that they go through. Now, because of this reluctance on the part of many mainstream host societies to accept the diaspora individuals as part of them, many diaspora individuals actually adopt something called hybrid identity, or we saw the hyphenated identity. Now, identity again, the characteristic of diaspora identity is it's multiple, hybrid. It undergoes transformation and production. Now again, if you look at those terms, transformation, so there's this change, it's not constant. Yeah, so there's this change. Production, it's evolving into something, so that's always there. So diaspora identity is multiple, hybrid, undergoes transformation and production everywhere in the world. It's not just for one diaspora community, it's pretty much the same everywhere. Now, for example, hyphenated or hybrid identities like, Thai Sikh, Indo-Canadian, Indian American. So you see that? So it's not just one identity. It's like there's a hybridity there. There's like this hyphenated multiple identities, isn't it? Yeah. So again, reference to Homi Bhabha about how cultures are this, mixedness, as he calls a hybridity, and how culture as something that's fluid. Identity again, being fluid, right? So that is really diaspora identity, the hybridity part of it. What exactly is cultural hybridity? Many of the diaspora individuals are embracing more and more of this cultural hybridity in many parts of the world. The reason is because it makes their lives much easier. And right now with globalization and everything, this is something that many diaspora individuals found useful in their lives, something that they think where they can actually kind of like have both the local and global, together, like the glocal, and that actually is hybrid. And when we talk about identities, as in there is this, your own cultural identity, and then of course, there are elements that you can take from that. Then you can take elements from the identity of the host country, and probably whatever other diaspora communities that are in the country that you can get elements from. So it's kind of like a, what can I say, like a mishmash of all of these different identities, yeah, the elements, the cultural elements that form something called cultural hybridity, and which many of the diaspora individuals actually welcome, yeah. So there is not that, what can I say, something that we find in earlier diaspora studies about this assimilation, melting pot situation is not really happening. Yeah, not like complete integration into the whole society or anything. You kind of like pick and choose, yeah? I mean, elements of it and then put them together. Something that suits you, like that kind of thing. So that is what diaspora individuals are doing these days. The current generation, I'm talking about the hybrid culture of the current diaspora generation. And obviously with modernization, globalization, this is like, the transnational character of, I didn't put the term out there, but basically it's the transnational character of diaspora individuals, yeah, negotiating across barriers, borders, borderless, beyond borders, so that kind of, with regard to language, culture, spiritual, racial, physical, in every way. So there is that, that there's the, like transcending, or kind of like, just borderless, beyond borders, yeah, so that kind of situation. And then of course we know that hybridity actually embraces everything. It's more inclusive, yeah. And it's like a postmodern concept, isn't it? Like that, what is that, the nothing absolute really, but what can I say, like embracing all of these, like, yeah. So you have like partial identities, you have multiple roles, pluralism, yeah, pluralistic selves. everything happens with the current diaspora identity, because they embrace cultural hybridity. And, you know, so basically one single individual, there is like a mix of the different cultures that constitute who you are. Yeah, that's the new diaspora identity. And when I talk to a lot of people, even though at first they said that we were not really happy with this so-called hyphenated identity, yeah, because we do very in-depth interviews, yeah. So so you need to kind of like probe into, oh, why that happens, but then like, you know, so when you like probe into all of these things, you know, they all are welcome to this whole idea of cultural hybridity, because they think that this is something that is useful to them in this world. And many of them are like, you know, many of them, when we think about it, the current generation is like, they have more exposure, yeah, they're more international, globalized, all of those. So this is something that suits them. Identity crisis is real. How they are kind of like, you know, tackle this issue is moving towards more of a cultural hybridity. That's what I'm trying to say, yeah. And many of them are very open to the idea of the so-called global citizenship. So that is what I want to end this presentation with, the idea of being global citizens, basically embracing cultural hybridity and, you know, the whole idea of like a global culture and, well, more like, remember I said global, right? Global, local, everything mixed together, kind of like more exposure, welcoming of the different cultures, being respectful, being understanding, take whatever is, you know, good for you. And, you know, being like not stuck in a certain fixed identity, but understanding that there are different layers to it, and cultural hybridity is something that is beneficial to them, and it increases like creativity, cultural imagination, all of those, yeah. So it is basically having this, as I put it there, like local knowledge and global cosmopolitanism in a way. So this is like something that is beneficial to the current generation of diaspora individuals. So from my research, I found that many of the current generation of the Thai Sikhs are open to the idea of this so-called global citizenship by adopting the concept of cultural hybridity. Yeah, so yeah, there you go. So that is about my presentation. Now, if you have any questions or anything, you are welcome. Questions? Anyone has any questions? I'll try to answer. Anyone? Feel free to ask.
Okay, so as a beginning, I myself will ask some questions to you, JG.
Sure.
Like, how was your experience in Thailand? Did you find it difficult, or whether you have some kind of identity crisis there, being an Indian to a different place? So how was your experience, especially because you are working in a university and the people are different there? So can you share some experience of yours?
Sure. Thanks, Ria, for the question. So I've been living in Thailand for over 10 years now. Pretty much, I have to say Thailand is home now. And initially, I had, well, issues obviously with the language a little bit, because when you go outside you have to speak in Thai. You know that, some of you might have visited Thailand. You understand that when you go outside, people, they rarely speak English. Yeah. So that was an issue in the beginning. Then obviously I learned the language. Now I'm fluent in Thai, so it's not a problem anymore for me. Other than the racial discrimination, not so much. I have to say, I'm fortunate in that way, because people kind of don't. I never had any experience like that, and I don't know, for whatever reason, it's yeah. I don't know whether it's because, like, I started speaking Thai, or I never had any bad experiences. But the adjustment in the beginning with the language just being out and about, that was a little bit of an issue. But many people talk about the problem with racial discrimination and everything, but that thing is rare. Personally, I haven't felt anything like that, but from some of my friends' experience, people actually had, like, people looking down on them and being prejudiced and everything. But that is again a universal issue, because you see that, like, everywhere. And in Thailand, to be honest, like, it's like that in every country. I think people tend to have, like, people from a different part of the country are looked down upon by people who are in, like, the bigger cities or whatever. So that's there in Thailand as well. Yeah, anyway. But no first-hand experience with racial discrimination, fortunately for me. Working in a university, it's an awesome experience, because our university is very diverse. I cannot say this about other universities, I don't know, but for us, it is very diverse, and we have professors from different parts of the world, really, and we are very inclusive, and never had any issues with race, gender, anything of that sort. So we are very open and liberal and inclusive in that sense. Yeah. And it's an international university. So even though majority of the students are Thais, they all have, like, some sort of an international background. Probably they went to, like, international schools, they were part of exchange programs, and then we get, like, a lot of exchange students from different parts of the world. So it's very diverse again. So you don't really speak Thai at all in university. And we follow the American curriculum. So we have, like, our summer in August. I had my summer vacation, like, last month. So it's a different kind of situation there. Even though we are in Thailand, we follow a different curriculum. Our holidays are not like the local Thai holidays and everything. So that kind of difference. And university is absolutely awesome. I can't complain about that, not being there. But I mean, discrimination or anything of that sort, yeah. But people do. Let me tell you that, like, there is always this, from my experience working, like, doing research, fieldwork research, people belonging to the Sikh community, they said that, like, Thai people thought that they were, like, from India, and they tried to rip them off, like, when they're, like, buying something or whatever, and then start talking to them in their broken English and trying to, like, scam them. But then when they start speaking back in Thai, they were like, oh no, I don't want to sell this to you or whatever. So those things can happen as well. Yeah. But real fact, racial discrimination is there in every country. Some will have to, unfortunately face it. Some not so much. Yeah. So that is there in Thailand as well. But generally speaking, Thailand is a pretty easy country. People are nice. Yeah. it's home for me now. I think I know more people in Thailand than I know people in India right now. Well, that's a shame, right? But that's how it is now.
Thank you. Now the students can start asking questions, if any. There's a feedback form which is in the chat box, so I request everyone to fill it up. Okay, now if you have any queries, you can ask the resource person.
Ask.
For the kind attention of the participants, if you have any queries, please unmute your mic and ask the question. Thank you.
Feel free to ask any questions. I'm open to questions. So let me ask you a question. Are you all postgraduate students or undergraduate? What level are you? Can anyone tell me? Any of the students?
We are UG students.
Okay.
Yes.
Undergraduate, yeah. Okay. So do you actually have post-colonial literature as a course?
No, ma'am, we have UG students, PG students, researchers, and teachers from other colleges.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah. Okay. So you have like a combination of both UG and PG, right? Okay. All right. Mm-hmm.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Hi,
yes. Hi, ma'am. I enjoyed your talk. I was listening to it. I have just one question. How are the discourses of gender and disability dealt with in the diasporic discourses?
Gender and disability. That's a very good question. Yes. Now, you know that being part of diaspora community and gender, yes, depending on, it's a bit more complex, than the usual, like, when we generally talk about diaspora individuals with gender, especially depending on which part of the world you are in and what kind of diaspora community, if it is too closed or a little bit more open. Now, let me tell you, like with an example, okay? With the Thai Sikhs, when we talk about like gender, let's talk about women in the community, in the diaspora community. What I've come across is that women, they said that they have more restrictions than men in the community. So just like for example, in the case of my students, so they were like complaining, saying, well, and you know what, my brother actually gets to stay out and have like, stay at his friends and spend the night there. But then when I am out there and, just be out with my friends and everything, I have like a curfew. I have to be back home around, 8 o'clock or whatever. Why can't I do that? So this is a real problem, really. The reason is because you have like traditional parents back home, and something very, the problem is, it's not a problem. I shouldn't say problem, but the fact is that diaspora communities almost all times are more conservative than the community back in India. That's because they're like, something, many a times, like I'm talking about like the older generation, they kind of like hold on to their traditional values and everything, which they try to instill in their children. Yeah. So with gender, yeah, girls have this issue about like, this double standard there. With sons, they're more free. With daughters, not so much, that kind of thing. And again, when we talk about gender, we need to talk about the homosexual identity as well. So if you have somebody who identifies as gay, lesbian, whatever, somebody who is belonging to the spectrum, yeah, LGBTQIA+, it's worse. the situation is worse, and it's always that coming out stage, or it's very difficult for them to come out in the community because of that rigidity and the traditional mindset of the community. And it's very rare that they always, in fact, there are some people who actually confided in me that they cannot really be open about their sexual identity to their parents. They can't do that just because that's an issue. So yeah, with disability, again, it is like, with diaspora individuals, it's more of an issue. But I have to be very honest with you. I have never, ventured into that area of the disability part of the diaspora communities. Mine is more like, like gender, of course, it's inclusive. But yeah, it is it's more complex than mainstream individuals from the mainstream society, for sure. Yeah. Thank you, Betty.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anyone else?
So that's a question in the chat box. Shall I read?
Yes, please. Can I let me see. Is that how do we amalgamate ourselves in a new culture? That one, right?
Yes.
Let's see. Okay, the cultural conflicts and mental stress of it. How do we tackle them? All right. Again, there is the thing about it is you cannot completely amalgamate into a new culture, yeah, because these days that's why I talked about the cultural hybridity part of it, yeah. So it's not really that amalgamation there. When we say that, that's kind of like a blending into that it's very difficult, but we'll come to that. Let me talk about the conflicts and mental stress of it. Now, I have to say that this really, there are certain, here we have to talk about like, the first generation of diaspora individuals and their struggles coping with the challenges being part of a whole society. Because for the current generation, because they are like from, whichever country they are in, that's their own country, even though they experience whatever discrimination, there's no like adjustment issues there, yeah. So this is about like the first generation. They go through different stages of adjustment, and some people, obviously culture shock. I'm sure that many of you have heard of that and you know about it, the culture shock, that initial like boom, like, oh, what on earth am I dealing with? Like, this is like completely different from what I've felt before, that kind of thing. So that's a real struggle. And, culture shock thing, okay. Well, I shouldn't say that cultural shock is something that is only for diaspora individuals. Anybody who goes to a different country, like for example, when you go to a different country as exchange students or whatever, you still feel that culture shock. So that's the initial one. That's the initial state, initial conflict is that culture shock. And then from there, with that shock to realizing and, adjusting, learning. So it's kind of like that learning curve there. So you are trying to acclimatize with the, surroundings, with the people around, all of those things. You are in a way, planting yourself there. And it's just like, how you plant a tree and like water and, just nurture it and all of those. Yeah. Sorry, guys, I have 2 dogs. You see them in the background and yeah. And somebody rang my doorbell, but I'm going to, I really, Ria, sorry. Thing about being.
No problem, ma'am, that's okay.
Okay, it's okay. No problem.
Yeah, so you can hear them in the background. Somebody rang the doorbell, but they're ringing again. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Maybe you can go and pacify them and come back.
Sorry, it's it's not that. Let me, with your permission, everyone, my apologies. I have to go. It's just me here, so I have to just go and see who is ringing the doorbell, and I'll be right back, I promise, okay? Just right back. Okay, one second.
Okay, fine. So I hope all of you have filled the feedback forms. Please fill it up in order to get the certificates. And meanwhile, if you have any questions, you can ask her or you can leave it in the chat box. And an announcement to the students, there will be regular classes in the afternoon.
Sorry about that. That is sorted, everyone. My apologies. You know, that's not very professional, but we are all working from home, so I hope that you'll be kind towards me. And all right, so coming back to the conflicts that we were talking about and culture shock, yes, that is very real, and many people go through that when they just, you know, go to a different country. And then the different stages of adjustments. And I have to tell you that it depends on the individual. You cannot really generalize and say, okay, number 1, 2, 3, these are all the things that people go through. So it's not like that. It's up to the individuals. You know, some people adjust better. Some people, you know, might take longer time to adjust. But again, it's all like this stage of adjustment, yeah? And how do you tackle them is trying to, you know, find group of friends, trying to go out and be part of the mainstream society, the activities that is happening, and you know, don't always sort of like you know, put yourself in a box situation and like live in your own bubble situation, you know, kind of like try to go out into the society and try to interact more with the natives and everything. Try to be part of what is happening in the mainstream society. That can help, rather than just being like, you know, cooped up at home and just be in your own bubble. So getting more exposure and experience will definitely help you with that situation. And going back to the amalgamation thing, it's not, it does not happen with many individuals. We call it like, you know, the cultural assimilation part of it. That rarely happens with individuals. And these days, nobody really, I don't know, go for that, because you all, you know, we all come from different cultural backgrounds and everything, and we go to a different country, and obviously we cannot like completely forget our culture and values and everything, right? I mean, just think about it. Can you, like, you know, we make our in Kerala, we make our fish curries and our you know, kappa mean, all of those, you know. Do you think that you go somewhere else and, you know, you can completely, I'm gonna ban kappa and mean curry from, because I'm being part of another society, so I'm not gonna eat that again. It's not like that, right? That's a silly example, but, you know, I hope you get the drift. So this is how it is. Like, you know, we all have certain things in us that are like, you know, like culturally that we you know, carry with us. And then, you know, again, you just pick and choose in some you know, sometimes we call it selective acculturation, you know, and hybridity, of course, all of those things. So basically pick and choose what is best for you when you go and live in a different country. And nobody really now, it is more, you know, we are, you know, we have to look at it from a postmodernist point of view about nothing is absolute and everything. It's like everything has to be more inclusive, and you need to embrace and respect elements from different cultures and see how you can incorporate that into your life and, just adjust better to the society. So, yep. Question. So I hope that I answered that question. How is the connection with the government so troublesome? Okay. Well, talking from, I can like say authoritative, but yeah. Well, I know what's happening in Thailand. That's it. So with the connection with the government, yeah. I mean, there were cases of like, earlier on people were asked to, like with the Sikhs, they were asked to remove their turban, for post and everything. But another thing, okay, this is very important. In Thailand, even if you're born in Thailand and you belong to the Sikh community, Indian, whoever, you need to have like a Thai name and a Thai last name. So that is there. That is something that is not common in, I think, when we talk about the West. So this is there. So people have to go through this. And there are Thai Sikhs and Thai Indians in different governmental organizations and the government and everything, but not so much really. And they're very courteous and everything with the relation. Obviously, there is an involvement of the Sikh community in different areas, different sectors of Thailand, but not to where, you have, I mean, I would say you need, in here, we need more participation, more inclusion of diaspora individuals. It's not so much, but things are happening in the right direction, so that is a happy thing. All right, the next one. Thank you, Gipsy. Appreciate it. All right, Shilpa, thank you. Okay, Gitu. Okay, is it possible to compare and contrast the process of colonial mimicry, diaspora concept, embracing a new culture in the cultural milieu? New culture. I don't know whether I really understood that question very well. Well, right now, I don't know. I hope I understood this correctly, or maybe not, but I'll try to answer this. Like embracing a new culture. In a can you like, yeah, can Gitu turn on the microphone and talk? I don't
yeah,
know.
ma'am. We are actually trying to embrace a new culture there. If you are
That's
in
right.
a new land, you're actually trying to embrace a new culture. So can we compare that process, the process of accepting a new culture, with that of colonial mimicry?
Yeah, I think yeah, in a way, but nothing is forced really. I mean, this is up to in diaspora in this situation, like especially when we talk about the current situation, like nothing is forced on anyone really, in a way. So they have their free will. They have freedom to choose anything, like whatever they want, like imitating language, dress, politics, whatever, like cultural attitude. Well, basically that's what like colonial mimicry is, right? If I remember correctly. Yes. Yeah, so it is more, it's on the part of the diaspora individuals whether they want to accept whatever. So in a way, right now, like, they have the freedom to pick and choose what is suitable for them with the current generation. So, yeah. how far do you think language plays a role in keeping the distinctions in society alive? Language plays a very important role, and especially in the case of diaspora individuals, knowing the language is very important to be part of the society. And from my own experience living in a different society all these years, learning the language actually makes your job easier, make you more, it makes things more comfortable, a little bit more inclusive. And with the diaspora individuals, like right now with the current generation, of course, because I talk about current generations because it's really different from how it was before. Yeah, like we talk about the adjustments and everything. Right now, everybody, they speak whichever part of the world they are in, like in the US, in the UK. I mean, of course, people speak English with the kind of accent that the natives speak. And in here, the Thai Sikhs, the Thai Indians that are here, they speak Thai just like other Thais. There is no difference with that. So language is not really a problem there. But with those who are migrating at first, coming to a new country and everything, learning the language is very, very important. It's a powerful tool for you to at least try to, just kind of like move about in society, make your life easier. Yes, language is very, very important. Yeah. Anything else? You guys have very good questions. Keep them coming. I'll try to answer. I don't have answer for all the questions, but I'll try to answer. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Aneha. Hi, Cassia, you have something to ask?
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to ask, and how do you see your future in the land? And as a teacher there, as a researcher there, how do you see yourself in the future?
Like my future teaching in Thailand? Well, right now, so many things are happening, so I'm very happy with it because our university is very much research oriented, so we have like different research clusters and everything happening. We do a lot of research, like field work, and obviously we cannot go out and do field work research. Now everything is like online, with the COVID situation. But basically, they encourage us, generous fundings, all of those. So we are able to travel to different parts of the world, like, present papers. And so I'm really happy with that. And, looking forward to some publications pretty soon. So career-wise, yeah. I mean, with the university that I am in now, let me tell you very honestly, you cannot compare where I work with like local Thai universities, So I don't really know how things work there. It's completely different. Ours is international, so we go by like a different set of standards and everything. And so not too bad, but things are looking up now. But that doesn't mean that, I will be staying here forever. I'm looking at wherever my research take me and everything. So I might later on, but right now, very happy here. So with what I'm doing, research is going absolutely awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
That's really great news.
Thank you.
Yeah, it really, the sparkle in your eyes and the confident smile that you give us, it shows how happy you are there. I'm really happy to see it. And thank you so much for your presence.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, confidence is something that all of us really need. I mean, why are we not really confident, right? I mean,
yes, true.
We all have to. Nobody is. One thing about, like, when you talk about confidence, I teach public speaking. I give courses in public speaking. So I tell my students that, you don't really have to think about, being like perfect all the time. We are not perfect people. We can never be perfect, So do the best that you can. You don't have to be really embarrassed about making mistakes or whatever. That happens. If you make a mistake, say sorry and continue. That's it. Why are you being afraid? You don't have to really, worry about judgment or what would other people think. That's their problem, not your problem. So yeah, just be confident, you guys. Yep.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I truly believe that the session is indeed very beneficial. It has definitely added to our knowledge. We did have diasporic literature for our previous semester. Yeah, this has added to our knowledge. So thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, a sincere word of gratitude is much sweeter than the extravagancy of expensive gifts. That's what I feel. And to state a few words of gratitude, I'd like to welcome another eminent professor and also the coordinator of this lecture today, Mrs. Ansi Syriac. Please extend the word of thanks.
Thank you, Kessia. Knowledge is power. Knowledge shared is power multiplied. Respected Chief Guest of the day, Dr. Anjana Warren, our beloved HOD, Dr. Ria Susanskaria, dear participants, colleagues, and my dear students. Vykhari Lecture Series is a dream materialized for BCM family, a platform where knowledge is shared. The Postgraduate Department of English is indeed proud to conduct a webinar of this magnitude as part of the Vykhari Lecture Series 2021. Dr. Anjana Warren, our resource person, is a great scholar and a humble human being. A cordial and gentle person, it was a joy talking to her each time. A person ever willing to help, she has always provided immediate response to all my queries. In fact, she broke the wall of formality by asking me to address her informally. On behalf of BCM College English Department, I express my deep sense of gratitude to Dr. Anjana Warren for shedding light on the lesser known and unfamiliar aspects of diaspora lives. Thank you so much, ma'am. I would also like to thank the management of BCM College for giving us a platform to conduct this webinar. I thank our beloved HOD, Dr. Ria Susanskaria, who extended her wholehearted support to this venture from the very beginning. Thank you, Ria ma'am. I thank the co-coordinator of the webinar, Mr. Vijay Thomas, and all my colleagues for their contributions. A big thanks to all the participants who made this webinar a grand success. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am. And thank you, Anjana ma'am. Calling this a day. Thank you all for joining. And bye.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you all the participants. Have a good day to all of you. Thank you.